Hey, welcome back to the Small Business Mindset. I love to read, and I like to read all different kinds of things because I think exposing yourself to the knowledge of others gives you an edge sometimes. It may be help you hone an idea, it might help you get started, make you feel motivated or inspired. I just got done rereading a book that I read a number of years ago, and that book is Shoe Dog. Shoe Dog is written by Phil Knight. So, Phil Knight is the creator of Nike. I'm sure you've heard of that brand. But what is so fascinating about this book and Phil Knight's story is that, like many of us, he was a small business owner and a struggling entrepreneur for, you ready for this? 18 years before Nike really hit it big. His story is one of passion. His story is one of perseverance and trying to block out a lot of the naysayers. Some of them are the people that are closest to him to continue to strive forward and create this well-known international billion-dollar company. So what's the story? If you haven't read it, check it out. Shoe Dog is a great book. It was actually just published in 2016, so actually not that long ago. But Phil's story spans decades. So why did it make such an impact on me? And why do I think this story is important to share with you on the Small Business Mindset? So Phil Knight, let's kind of go back in the day. Where did this whole concept of Nike come from? Well, believe it or not, it started with track shoes. Now, I'll be honest with you. My son runs track, and I had no idea that there was a thing called track shoes until he started running. And I thought, oh, he just wore normal tennis shoes. What's the difference? Well, believe it or not, there is. So Phil Knight, as a young man, went to college and he was recruited to run track for the University of Oregon. Now, at the time, track wasn't really a mainstream sport. It really wasn't well known. People thought, why would you want to run? And this is back in the late 50s, early 60s. So in that part of the United States, baseball was kind of the American sport. People thought, why would you want to go out there and run and run and run? How boring is that? I mean, are you silly? Why would you want to do that? So running really wasn't an acclaimed area, but it was a passion for Phil. And he found some success running for Oregon. Now, he was not a star athlete. He did get recruited to run college sports, which is notable in itself. But he was not by any means the record keeper and make it to the Olympics. None of that. But he found not only synergy in what his goals were, but found out this is something that fueled his passion, that drove him literally as he was putting the miles in. And more importantly, he found a coach in Bill Bowerman, who was the track coach at Oregon at the time, and found such motivation and information from him as far as process and perseverance and looking into the finite details of what makes a runner good. It's not just stamina, it's not just, ability, but even things like making sure rest is part of the component, whether you're a runner or whether you're just a business person, giving yourself time to reflect and recharge. But Bill Bowerman also was kind of the brains behind, hey, let's take a look at the current footwear we have. If I can create a lighter type of shoe, take some ounces off of the shoe, will that make you faster? Will it accelerate you better? Even with all of the muscular ability, your diet, your rest, all the other things you're doing to create an ideal athlete, it's the other elements that you're putting on your body that could make you that much better. Conversely, I think it's interesting, Phil also goes into his relationship with his father. So I mentioned a little bit ago how he had some naysayers in his life. I think if you were an entrepreneur or a business owner that's gone off on your own and kind of deviated from the norm, maybe the normal trajectory of your life, where, you might have a parent, and in this case, Phil Knight did have a parent who liked security. And he had a job and he did fine. And, but he wanted his son, he's like, you're getting a college degree. You're in a position where you can go make a nice solid living at something. Why not just do that? That'll be easier. That'll give you security. You can raise a family. You can do all the normal things, right? But Phil Knight wasn't into the normal things. And him and his dad clashed over that for a number of years. He talks about the fact that ironically enough, his dad's name was also Bill. So he had Bill Bowerman, the coach, and he had Bill Knight, the dad. And what two crazy opposite people that they were and the influence they had. So think about your own life. Who in your life has been a mentor to you, has pushed you, has caused you to kind of rethink things. But at the same time, think of other people in your life that thought you were just crazy. Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to risk it all? Why would you want to go through a time period where you had to scrape by? You didn't know if you're going to make your rent payment or your mortgage payment or your car payment. They might have, threatening to turn your lights off. Are your kids going to have food to eat? I mean, that's a lot to take on. And many of us, it's safer and more comforting to take the easy way, meaning the more secure job. Get the paycheck first, worry about the dream later, or the dream can be a hobby later. But Phil Knight was unique because deep down in him, he had this passion for running and this passion to create better running opportunities. How could I influence and create something that people were passionate about? And more importantly, they saw results. So as he was developing these track shoes, he literally did a grassroots type of guerrilla marketing. He kept a day job because he couldn't afford to pay himself an income for many, many years as he was creating the shoe company. And believe it or not, Nike, the first company he developed, was actually called Blue Ribbon. Blue Ribbon because he had earned some blue ribbons during his time as a track athlete. And he thought, okay, that'll be the name of the company. Well, we're going to talk about where Nike came from later on. But the funny thing is that he had to hire people to be salesmen and literally go out and try to sell these track shoes out of the trunk of their car at track meets. So you can imagine, I know I've been to many track meets over my years as a parent of a child that likes to run track. Could you imagine showing up to a track meet with your kid and in the parking lot over here, some guy pedaling track shoes out of his trunk or out of the back of the car? How crazy is that? But realistically, in that time of history, you couldn't go to just a sporting goods store and buy a track shoe. You couldn't go to Amazon and order a pair and have them delivered the next day. You had to start getting creative. And those that are true athletes wanted an edge, just like of us in business. The reason why we read books, the reason why we go to leadership seminars, the reason why you're listening to this podcast, you want to get an edge on how to run your business and how to level up, right? So these people were like, I'm going to go to where the audience base is. And more importantly, I want you to try my shoe. And then I want you to tell me what you think about it. Tell me what works. What do you like? What do you don't like? How is it holding up? Does it allow you to do things differently? How are you able to take some seconds off of your time? Do you feel less winded when you're done? I mean, give me all the specifics and that product development, making those tweaks and stuff like that. So as time went on, so Phil Knight officially launched Blue Ribbon in 1962. It wasn't until, get this, 1980, 18 years later, that Nike was a success. That's when Nike went public and you could actually buy stock in the Nike Corporation, and they expanded their offerings and had partnerships and all that kind of stuff. Then 18 years later, that's when Phil Knight financially became a millionaire. But it was that long in that kind of process and that scraping by. He has war stories of how banks literally kicked him out. He couldn't borrow any more money. He was in jeopardy of losing everything. And his wife, Penny, came to work with him at the company, and she held a role too. And so if you think about many of you that have started organizations, we put our families to work and we put our friends to work and we ask a lot of favors. And, we have a lot of IOUs and we stretch the limit. One thing that I thought was interesting about Phil Knight's story is how lean he ran his company and how on the edge he ran his company. Now, this is something, I will be honest with you, would probably be a little nerve-wracking for me, and it'd probably keep me up a lot of nights. He called it the float. He was so convinced that what he was creating would eventually get embraced by the mass public of athletes, that he's like, I need to continue to invest and get more shoes and, develop more product lines and do all this stuff. It will come. But it took 18 years to come. And so during those 18 years, what he called the float, he would go to a bank and he would get a loan for several thousand or more dollars so he could go buy the products to manufacture the shoes, to get the shoes out there. And then as the revenues come in, he would reinvest everything back into the company. So he didn't take a salary for a long, long time. So he kept another job to keep things afloat in his house. But what I call about the float is that he was not building up his cash reserves, because he was literally trying to get this product built and try to get this company built and generate the interest. Because as you know, if somebody is in a business where you're selling a product, the cost of doing business is you have to go buy the product first to be able to then resell it or repackage it to be able to resell it into the hands of people. The more you're able to produce and the more you're able to sell, the more your revenues will go up. And so it's a scale of economy. It's like, how can I acquire enough product and sell enough product to get to a point where my margins are enough that I can then scale? He was always on the float or the edge of literally bankruptcy for 18 years. Doesn't that blow your mind? It's like, how do you live like that? He had such faith in what he was doing. And he recruited and surrounded himself with people that shared the same passion. One thing I learned from him is surrounding yourself with the right people is so, so important. And more importantly, surrounding yourself with the right people that are different than you. It is so easy sometimes to be in business and think, okay, here's my idea, here's my drive. As long as they get what I'm saying and we're all going the same direction, then that should be fine. The last thing I want to encourage you to do as a business owner is get people on your team that all they say is yes to you. They agree with everything you say. They're on the bus. They're doing it. It feels good. It feels really good because you're like, okay, they get it. We're going this way. But at no time is your team ever willing to come to you and say, you know what? Have you thought about it this way? Or have you considered that? Or would it question you? Why do we do it this way? And let you respond to them. Because you think, wait, I shouldn't have to respond to them, right? Because we're all on the same team. But here's the power of building a company. You need people to question you. You need people to push you in different directions and have you rethink your processes, your motivations, and how it all comes together. Because honestly, you can't be the expert in all the areas of your company. You can't. You need to understand them. You need to understand that someone else needs to come in and be the expert and trust them. For years, Phil Knight actually pushed the idea back about going public. So he was a private entity, meaning he had no stockholders or shareholders. He had some partners and investors in his company, but you could not buy public stock in Nike. And he didn't want that. He was so afraid that it would change his culture because he had built this very kind of a homegrown, tight-knit team of people that would push his buttons. And I think it was good. And would question him and kind of push him into different areas, but they were also willing to go on the edge with him too. He was afraid if he were to take this company public, that the shareholders would then come in and he'd lose all of the passion and the originality that the company provided. Thankfully, over time, he kept asking questions. And actually, he evaluated going public for years, off and on, off and on, off and on. What do we need? How does this work? How can we do it? He was not afraid to ask questions. He was not afraid to be bold. He was not afraid to go on the float and live on the edges of financial ruin at any time in life. Thankfully, over time, he realized, okay, I can't continue to grow. So every year, sales would grow. A few thousand a year, then millions a year. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, he's building this incredible company. And he was, but he wasn't able to explode yet. One of the reasons why he only focused on track shoes to start. That was his niche. And I know I've talked before on this podcast, there is no problem with really narrowing your focus. Okay, my niche in his case was track shoes. That's it. Not track apparel, not track, accessories. It was literally a track shoe. That's it. And he had several one was more distance running, one was more for sprinters, things like that. But it was literally in the track shoe. His biggest competitor at the time was Adidas. So a company that had a track shoe, but they also had a lot of other lines of apparel and things that athletes or non-athletes could buy. And believe it or not, their track shoe was not their biggest revenue maker for their company. So Phil Knight was going up against the big dog, but the big dog had a lot more versatility in what they were offering. Now, even though Adidas was offering a lot more versatility, they were still in the realm of athletic wear. Let's call it that. Whether it was a basketball shoe or a tennis shoe, or a tracksuit, a hoodie, things like that. They had a lot more versatility in what they were selling, so they could grab revenue sources from a lot of different areas. Phil had this one line. He had track shoes. He was going after a behemoth, and he was trying to conquer them through innovation and ingenuity. When he went public, the advice he got too is like, before we do this, We need to broaden our scope. We can't just be a track shoe company, because if for some reason another, and at the time, so in the late 70s, coming up into 1980, other companies were entering the scene. And he's like, okay, they can't just be that one company too. We need to get a lot broader in our scope. So you might think, okay, well, where did Michael Jordan come from? Well, that didn't actually come for years later. But he decided to get into basketball, believe it or not. He decided to get into the game of tennis, believe it or not. And he realized that the power of marketing to be able to get his product out to the masses was to collaborate with some of these celebrity athletes, the one that were doing the best, the best of the best. So how do you get out there? Well, honestly, he would show up on their doorstep. He would have to say, I want you to try this. He would have to give them the product for free. He would have to take honest feedback. I will create this product that aligns with the things you need this product to work for. So for example, for those that are tennis buffs, and if you remember back in the day, Jimmy Connors, and then later John McEnroe, and he was kind of fanatical for his fun attitude on the court, but it fit really in line with what the Nike company was all about. They liked edgy people. They liked people that were sensationalized, that were living on the edge, and that fit with their brand. So the more they could get their product into the hands of people that were using it to the most extreme amount, intrigued the public. And it intrigued the public enough, they're like, we want to be like you. So literally just having a Nike swish and the shoe on an elite athlete, whether it was in the track and field, at the Olympics, on the court, was so powerful. And we see that today. In fact, a lot of us people, non-athletes, like to emulate athletes because there's something special about being an athlete. There's something that pushes your body to the limit, that creates stamina and perseverance and sweat and tears and all that stuff that we can directly relate to the rest of our lives, whether we are trying to accomplish a personal goal or a business goal. Aligning with athletes is very, very powerful. So when they went public, they had decided to expand their product offering before they did that. In addition to that, they got some good advice too. Instead of going just straight public, and I'm not a stockbroker, I don't claim to be, or a financial analyst, but creating a platform where they could sell A and B shares of their company and maintain some control is very important. So fast forward a little bit, and this is not in the book, but I'm sure those of you probably saw documentaries and movies about Michael Jordan. If you don't know who Michael Jordan is, I think you need to look it up. But the GOAT of basketball, this phenomenon that came out of the University of North Carolina, and Nike went after him and signed him, and they created this basketball shoe just for Michael, the Air Jordans. And they put in this newer technology, the Air Pocket, and made it just sensationalized. And you can imagine what happened after that. But I think it's discovering that, hey, what's your culture? What's your mission? What are you all about? And finding people that align with you in that, and never taking no for an answer, and being willing to be so passionate about what you're all about that you will have success if you stick with it long enough. So this story, I encourage you, go check out or buy Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. I really, really enjoyed reading this book again. What an incredible story that I'm sure a lot of us say, oh, it was an overnight success. It was not at all. It was an 18-year overnight success. And I would love to get Phil on here to talk about, where he talks a lot about the trials and tribulations as far as this company, but what kept him from just shutting it down and walking away? Because I think he was talented enough in his own right. He could have made a great living. But he'll tell you in this book too, it wasn't about the money. I think the money was a bonus later on in life. And look at all the amazing things he was able to do, all the philanthropy and the different initiatives him and his family are able to support, which is pretty incredible. But he also, suffered a lot of loss and a lot of tragedy. And he shares that as well. So I want to hear from you. I know I read a lot, and I get a lot of recommendations from people out there and all of you. What has inspired you? What memoir or autobiography or business coach have you learned about and heard their story? I want you to share it with me, whether you put it in the comments or DM me. I think there's a pretty powerful stories, and share why was that important to you. Hope you go out there and do some great things and maybe go for a run sometime.